live in the glory of God-sized story.
Hello and welcome to another episode of God-Sized Stories. This week, my guest is Andy. Andy, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andy Hongisto. I was homeschooled in a Christian home. I've been a Christian for most of my life. When I got a little bit older, I went to NIU to study art, specifically drawing. And from there, I was a sign maker at Hy-Vee for 9 years, where I got to make chalkboard signs and help open stores and mostly paint and do displays and stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, Andy, I've known you now for it's been at least a decade,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a little bit more now, which is crazy.
It is a little crazy.
I lived with you for a time. I even so far as went to hide a mannequin head on his head.
Oh my gosh. I thought it was a raccoon. Do you remember that? Because there was that hatch above in my room. There was an attic hatch, and everyone was like, "There's a raccoon that lives up there." And so I touched the hair as I'm climbing into bed, and I'm like, I wanted to throw that off the porch just because we were on the second story or whatever. I wanted to just open the door and just throw it, but I recognized
But so, I've known you for a while now, and this thing that I've always known about you is this wonderful creativity and love of art, specifically for handmade art. You were talking about your chalkboard signs. I know you do a lot of things with Copic markers now. What inspired that art? Where did it all begin?
Well, I mean, I would say if we're talking about, the beginning, I think that's something that God kind of puts in anyone's heart. If you're a creative person, whether it's art or music, I think it's something that you're just kind of born with. For me, though, I think it always stemmed from the desire to tell stories. Like, I remember even in preschool and up, I was always just drawing with Crayola markers. Like, my hands were just multicolored completely, which they still probably are a little bit, but I always just drew with markers and had tons of books with different characters and pirates and monsters and stuff like that. That was just my favorite thing.
So I know for some people, they've kind of struggled at some point in their life with art and creativity and connecting it with their faith. Have you had that struggle before?
Yeah. So when I really decided I wanted to be an artist, I would say maybe I was around 13. But maybe around the time I turned 15, I was, kind of let's just say every average boy growing up in the early 2000s, which is to say I watched tons of action cartoons like Dragon Ball Z. I was obsessed with Star Wars, Mega Man, whatever else you want to think about. So that was the main, my favorite thing to draw was usually that kind of stuff, kind of like comic book stuff, superhero stuff. But, growing up reading the Bible a lot, I would read the Psalms a lot. It was my favorite book of the Bible to read. And I would just randomly read it as a kid, just randomly pick verses. And I remember one day I finally found a verse that said, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was a man whose soul loves violence, God hates, or something like that. And I was like, oh no, do I love violence? I think now I've learned that that's not really the truth. I don't think that's the kind of violence he was talking about. But at the time, it really struck a nerve in me, and it bothered me a lot. So I decided that I couldn't be myself anymore, and I had to reinvent myself so that God would appreciate my art. So I decided that I would like motorcycles from now on. Because O.C. Chopper was a really big deal on TV at the time. So now I like motorcycles and choppers. But the truth is, that couldn't last because it wasn't me.
Yeah.
But in that struggle, I reached out. So I used, like any good early 2000s kid, I used the internet a lot to go on cool message boards and stuff. But I could really only find one interesting art site that was also Christian related, and I can't remember anymore the name of it, but there are a bunch of completely different, diverse artists, but a lot of them were probably how old we are now back then. like in their 20s. I guess we're not in our 20s anymore, are we, Craig? But they had some cool stuff, so I reached out to them. I emailed them and I said, "What should I do? Like, am I doing this wrong? Like, is God mad at me?" And I remember the guy who emailed me back, I want to say was kind of like the website runner, and he said, I think I asked him like, where should I draw the line? And his response, and I'll always remember this, he said, "The line's over there. Let's dance across it." And I think as a 15-year-old, I was like, what? But now I understand what he meant. I think the point is that this world is still a fallen world, and God knows it. And especially for someone like me who wants to tell stories with art, you have to tell stories with conflict, and that's okay. You don't have to whitewash everything and make it VeggieTales. Not everything is meant to be VeggieTales.
Well, that's fair, but there's still also there is a place for VeggieTales.
Of course,
growing up with it.
Well, of course,
that's true. Like we have things like most everyone I know loves Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone. Well, I guess some people might argue, but most people I know would argue that is a great use of creativity and honoring God at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So many artists I feel like have towed that line very well. Of like, it doesn't have to be super like in your face, like paint every painting just be Jesus on the cross and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to all be a Christian bookstore in the mall.
Exactly.
Obviously, there are things too where I think you could cross the line, but I think for the most part, God's willing to work with the person that you meant to be. You don't have to make up a fake version of yourself.
Right. So what would you say then to other Christians out there that are really struggling with that? Because I've known many throughout my life even that don't know where to go with, like, I really have all these great creative thoughts and ideas, but I don't want to dishonor God. What would be really, or like maybe they're in a church that really doesn't value their type of creativity. Maybe that church just thinks musical creativity is the only way. Stuff like, what would you say to a person like that?
Yeah, so I think that is sometimes a problem in church, going all the way back to like really early church, is that art became taboo. It became something bad because it was something that, in ancient times people worshipped statues and stuff and idols. So the church instead just was like, well, it's good or it's bad. So it's one or it's zero. So it's out. It's just all out. Kick it all out. But the truth is, there's still lots of good implementation for art in a church. And me personally, our other friend Corey, who I know was on this podcast before, he started in our church. Him and I go to the same church. A really cool kind of discussion Sunday school class before church, where we just talked about art in the Christian world, and we got a really big variety of people going, like between like we had middle school kids all the way up to like 70-year-olds, and we had every different version of art. We had people coming in with their computer and their tablet to draw digitally, and we had someone else come in with gourds that he was wood-burning gourds.
Wow.
So it was a really cool variety, but everybody really got together and talked, and nobody was left out. The tables were so diverse, and it was really good to see because, like you said, the church sometimes, unfortunately, really puts music and worship on a pedestal because they think the best way to worship is music. But the truth is, you can worship with art too, and it was really nice to just see other people who want to create with their hands and not always just sing and make music, get to create and talk to each other and kind of in a really good Christian community setting, just get to talk about it and learn from each other and get better, no matter how good they were, how bad they were, and just keep going. It was really cool to see. It was really fulfilling for me. I really liked it. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to get back to doing it again when all this is over.
Yeah, that has been kind of a bummer as being, church not in a physical building right now with everything going on. I'm sure it's harder to do that, but also I'm sure it's provided you then personally with a lot of time of your own to be really honing your craft and working on you and your art. What are some things that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so like I said, I really like to tell stories. My favorite thing is comics. I really learned to love comics around the time I was 17, and I've made a couple. But right now, I just started a new comic called Deep Roots, which is kind of like a fantasy Dungeons and Dragons kind of based comic. It just started, so it's just kind of in its infancy, but it's gonna be fun to make. I'm having a real fun time with it. A little bit of some fighting going on, but the point of fighting is conflict, and there's always you can find good resolution in that.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying it so far. Every time you put anything up online, I'm always like, "Ooh, that's really interesting." It's like I like your style and what you try to make. If somebody was interested in finding your comic or your other art, where should they look?
If you just go to Instagram, just jump on Instagram and then type in Hungistador, which is kind of my fake last name, which is
Spell it. Yeah, there you go.
yeah, Hongistador, Hungistador, and you will find it. You'll find lots of knights and monsters and stuff.
It's a lot of fun. You've really been been adding a lot of different things to it with a lot of your art lately. I know you've been adding some really cool like holographic things to your work. It's just really nice to see people really stretching their creativity and really praising God for it. Because like there's people like me, I don't art at all. It's like I see stuff that you do, and I'm like, man. And it's like I know you work hard at it, and you've practiced a lot at it. It's not like something that you can just be like, yeah, I'm perfect now. I make $1 million paintings. Like,
Yeah.
so it's a skill that takes time, just like anything. But just like worship or singing in general, not everyone can do it. No matter how much some people practice art, music, writing, some people just aren't meant to do it. I'm one of those people. There's two things I can't do. I can't draw and I can't sing. Nobody wants to see or hear either of those things.
Oh.
So when I meet brothers and sisters like you included that have one of those gifts and have a unique way to worship the Lord, because I agree with you completely. Worship isn't just standing and singing with a group of people. It comes in so many ways. The best moment of worship I think I've ever had with God was, up in the mountains once when I was journaling. I was sitting and I was journaling in the morning when we were staying in a cabin in the mountains because I was just like, I felt this connection to God during that time. And that's really what worship should do for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. It comes in so many shapes and forms. So when I see someone that has a gift and they're using it to worship and connect to the Lord like you, it moves me and it makes me really happy to see what the Lord does. So Andy, thank you for that. And listeners at home, this is a great opportunity right now during this time of life when we're at home. Most of us, I know some people are really brave out there having to go still work and things like that. But this is a great chance to really stretch your creativity no matter what way you have it. Reach out to people. You can still do stuff like this. Andy and I are conversating online electronically now. You can still take classes from people. You can still ask for opinion, or you can try stuff. Maybe like you think, I'd like to try art. I've never done it. That's not true for me. I tried it. I know I'm not good at it. But maybe you are interested in trying. Do it or reach out. I'm sure if you reached out to Andy, he would send you some pointers on things to attempt to get better at art. And if I'm overstepping, correct me.
No, absolutely. Anytime.
So listeners, please think about that during this we can look for wonderful things in hard times, and I would say that is a wonderful thing to do, is try something creative during this time. I understand some of you have, 3 or 4 kids and trying to be a stay-at-home parent and still maybe working at home at the same time, and you don't have time for that. I totally understand. But if you do have a moment to really praise the Lord for something and give it a try, Andy, I would say you've probably agree with the statement that you've been blessed in many different ways by using your creativity for God.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember it was a real blessing that just fell in my lap to be able to do art professionally for Hy-Vee for a while there. So, it was really cool, and I didn't have anything to do with that. That was something God He just let that fall in my lap. And there's many different ways to use your creativity to glorify God. And just always be thankful. Be thankful that if you have that gift, or even if you just kind of want to use it to meditate. Maybe you don't feel like you're a super great artist, but that's okay. If you just like to draw and it kind of helps you kind of think and meditate, then that's great.
That's a great point. I didn't even actually think about that before. This is like, I like you as well, doodle sometimes in a notebook if I'm just sitting there and I have nothing to do. They're obviously, by the world standard, they're not good, but as you said, that's a good point. If someone can relax doing that, really connect during that time, that's really powerful. Yeah. So Andy, once again, so much for joining me and our listeners to really hear your perspective that a lot of people don't have with art. I know your art has impacted me in wonderful ways. I've had you do stuff, as you can see, here in the video. I have a little caricature right there that I had Andy do for Alicia and I a couple years ago as a Christmas gift. And it's just, art is such a beautiful thing that we can just get so much joy from. So thank you again for that, Andy. And listeners, thank you so much for listening. I couldn't do this without you.